Hello everyone, I've been painting portraits in pastel and oil for over 20 years, and I've also taught painting off and on for many years. For a while I've wanted to learn to paint digitally, but I was not very successful with an Intuos tablet in Photoshop. I never really got the hang of the tablet. I found it difficult to use due to the scaling from the pad to the screen. And then in November I got an XP pen monitor, a night and day difference. So I started again to learn to paint digitally. This time I decided to learn with Clip Studio Paint as it seemed to be more painting oriented and is a more affordable program. Searching on the internet, I could not find a lot of how-tos showing realistic painting styles with Clip Studio Paint, but I did see a lot of requests for how to shade faces. So in this short video, I would like to show how I converted my method of pastel painting to digital painting. What I'm going to show is a method I use to teach beginners how to paint realistic, three-dimensionally looking paintings, but using digital tools. This is the first exercise that I have my students do in my pastel courses. So to teach myself, to see if I could make this work, I decided that I would redo a black and white painting that I did as a demo in one of my classes, a picture of one of my students' daughters. I did this picture in class a little at a time over 8 weeks so students could see the steps that I went through to get a final drawing. From blocked in crayon looking start to finished piece is not very obvious. You need to see what it should look like at each step. The image on the right is the original 11 by 17 pastel from 2004. The digital one on the left I just did in 2017, and I will show you step by step how it was created. So why is it black and white? 3 reasons. 1, it's the cheapest for students. You only need 7 black to white chalks and a black and white pastel pencil to do it. That plus your fingers. That's all that was used to create that painting. No special tools or fancy brushes. It teaches students that it's what you know, not what tools, brushes, paints, mediums, etc. that are important. 2, if you don't learn how to paint in black and white, you'll never successfully learn to paint in color because of, number 3, how your brain utilizes values to see. There are 2 very important things you must understand about how your eyes and brain utilize values, which is the degree of shading from black to white. You can only recognize 3D shape in black and white, not color. Color adds a lot of extra info, but not 3D form, which is why a black and white painting or photo works at all. You can take all of the color info out of a picture and you can still see the shapes in it perfectly well. This makes value more critical than color. If the values or shading is correct, you can use any color. You can paint your friend with green skin and it still looks like a person. But change the values and he'll appear flat or with bulges all over. If you change the values, you're changing the shape. Even in color painting, values are the most important aspect. To me, painting is 3-dimensional. First dimensional is the line art, just placing everything on the page. The second is the value painting, which creates all the shapes. And the third dimension is color, which brings it to life. Each dimension added makes it much more complicated. Painting in black and white lets you work on your shapes without having to deal with color at the same time. Plus it's much faster. The other piece of information you need about values is that your brain sees them relatively. If you look at a bright area of a painting, you'll see a couple of thousands of values from light to lighter. But if you look in a dark area, you'll also see a range of thousands of values. You'll see a lightest in both areas. Beginners tend to use the same lightest and the same darkest shades in both the lighter and darker part of the pictures, and the results are overall flat and just kind of bumpy. The only way to do shading correctly is to get the overall values of the picture established first before you add any detail. For this exercise, I'm going to start with a line drawing. In this case, I just traced an outline of my original painting. There are many tutorials on line drawing out there. Shading, not so much. I'll be able to add some drawing tutorials later, especially tricks for drawing accurately from life. And I'll be doing a short video next on my odd order of teaching, the order I think that's easiest to learn things and how I try to teach them. Life drawing is last in my approach. You need to learn a lot of other things first, then life drawing's not so hard. If you are working from photo sources and working digitally, you can always start with a trace of your photo. From that point on, the photo is put up at the side and everything is done by eye. A note on tools before we start. I only use 3 tools in this demo. Brush, oil paint for blocking in, blend for blurring and smoothing, and airbrush soft for adding more color. This simulates where I add chalk on top of an existing chalk layer to correct values. I found I didn't need any other tools. As I go, I'll be exploring other brushes, but most just seem to be for auto texturing effects, which can save you a lot of time, but are not actually essential. I wanted to make sure I understood how to work with a few simple brushes first, as the number of brushes in these paint programs is overwhelming. I did use also the soft pencil for the line drawing, and note that the line drawing is not actually outline of shapes, but outlines of value areas. So with a line drawing available, how do you start coloring? A common method I see on YouTube is to just fill in an area with a single color, such as pick a color for the skin and fill the entire skin with it, then shade on top of that. This is the opposite of how I work, and I find it doesn't work at all well for most beginners. Starting with a single value means that 99% of what you just did is wrong and has to be corrected, and that can be very difficult. What I've always taught is to start by using a range of values and blocking in with your best guess of the correct value for that area. This makes a mosaic of flat tone shapes, but it already represents the final shading of your painting. It's the critical overall values of your painting. Now you have something to compare back to your original that you can start correcting. Plus, it's much, much faster. Getting the overall big shape values before you draw any detail is critical to getting an accurately shaded painting. My layer setup, I don't use the default white paper layer. I add a layer for the image to trace, a background layer to use later, a pencil layer for my outline, and one for the painting itself, all raster layers. Once I have my pencil outline done, the image layer is turned off or deleted. I then load it again in a separate window to have to the side as a reference for the rest of the process. Now my painting process. First, I make a set of value swatches to work from on the side of the painting layer. I'll try to have a link below to a PNG of these in case you would like to use mine. Next, I'll fill the background layer with a middle tone. I never paint on white. I will not be using full black or white until much later in the process. For the black and white I'm using at this stage, I'm using the next two black and the next two white values. I start with the eyes, and the values there are easy. You draw in a black pupil and put a white highlight. This may be the greatest contrast in your entire picture. The known black of the pupil gives you an instant known reference to work with. I roughly draw in the eyes, making sure the contrast between the iris and pupil is correct. That black pupil prevents me from drawing the iris too light. I draw in the whole eyeball and eyelash shape, but not individual eyelashes, they are less. This dark eye guarantees I won't draw in the face way too light in my picture. Next, I want to block in the entire picture with my value set using the oil paint brush. It is opaque and not pressure sensitive. I just want flat color. I do not use any black or white in this process. Here you can see I've blocked in everything but the dress. And to show you how neat it's not, I'll turn off the background. Also notice how dark it now looks. This is why painting on white is not a great idea. I now have a blocky looking image that already shows the shapes that my picture will have. Note that it's not particularly neat. I just want the right shade in roughly the right area. It's my starting shape. Then I'm going to use the blend tool and smooth all the edges. But I'm not just blurring, I'm drawing as I blur. The blur tool lets you drag color from one area to another, so I'm already starting to make corrections as I blend. Note the hair to the left of the eyes. There's a big horizontal straight edge there in the blocked in shape. In the blurred picture, you'll see I used the tool dragging from bottom to top and added the upside down V shape that I see in the picture. I'm doing that all over to start painting. But I want all the edges softened. This will blur out some of your features, not a problem. We're not ready to draw them in yet. I just want the value zones of the features to be present. I do leave the eyes alone to not kill that strong contrast there, which is a major reference. It helps prevent you from drawing the face too light. So I leave the eyes alone pretty much till the very end. Now I have an overall blurry representation of my painting, but in 2 steps it has very quickly started to look like a 3-dimensional image. So you can see how much it changes. I'm leaving the dress to do until the end. Normally I would do them together. The next 2 steps are repeated until the values are as close as I can get them. These steps are to use the soft airbrush and then blend again. I use the airbrush as I want to add color on top of what I already have, and I want it to be pressure sensitive to control how much I add. I use the biggest brush I can to avoid too many small bumps that have to be blended back out later. I usually try to work by first fixing the most wrong thing I see. In this case, I see that the shadow on the shoulder is too dark and that the chest area is also too dark. They both need to be lighter and with less contrast between them. I'll adjust this first as I start with the airbrush. In these steps, I'm adding all the soft detail I see in the picture as best I can and then blending it out. You can do this as long as you need to. And on a side note, it is so nice being able to lay my hand right on the picture as I draw. I don't have to cover up parts of the drawing with paper to avoid smearing it all over the place. There are a number of advantages to computer-based painting. The goal at this stage is to get all the values correct and also all the edges as soft or as hard as you see them in the picture. Another side note here, never draw what you can't see. Don't draw outlines or edges that you can't see in your source material. Allowing edges to be soft or even non-existent is critical to making things look as real as possible. Outlines look very artificial. I always want all the values correct before I do the final details of the features, eyes, nose, mouth, stray hair, etc. Otherwise, I can't draw them in the correct value. And I always do final values and colors on the face last, after I have everything around it as complete as possible, because that surrounding reference is what you are really painting to match. With the values pretty much done in my gray tones, I finally go in and do a first pass on painting the details of the airbrush, in whatever order I feel like, blending as needed to soften too hard edges or to reduce values that I get too extreme as I'm going. At this point, I've basically gone as far as I can without using white or black. So now I add white with the airbrush to carefully lighten up the lightest areas to bring the values up to the complete white to black range. I use black a lot less, but this is where I do also use it. Now the values are complete and at the full range that I want to use, and I'm ready for final details. Why wait so late to use black and white? Because everyone overuses them and ends up with flat black and white areas. White cannot be shaded any lighter, and black cannot be shaded any darker. They're just flat. Very little in any painting is actually white or black. So you need to save them till the values are as correct as you can get them in the grays without using black and white. Now with the values now at full range, I will make another detail pass. Now I'm actually getting a likeness and I'm drawing small detail and carefully. And finally, to finish, I'm just correcting details until I have everything I can see to corrected. Here I correct the mouth and finish some hair details. And then I notice that her right face is too puffy. The light area extends too far right, so I correct that. When is the painting finished? When you don't see any more differences that you want to correct and know how to correct. It's mostly a matter of what you can see. Here I left the dress undone until the last so you could see the difference between what the initial block looks like compared to how it looks later. Now I will blur it, adjust it, and finish it. Copying paintings. Why did I copy an old painting of mine instead of doing a new one? Because I'm trying to learn a new tool. Since I'm working from a painting, not a photo, I should be able to make my new one almost exactly like the old one. You can study a painting by looking all you want, but until you copy it, you'll not understand how it was done, and you'll not learn very much. Copying paintings is a very worthwhile project. What happens is that you make your copy and you look back at the original and go, why does mine look different? And here's where you start learning. Is the value different in this area, color, placement? It has to be one of those three. Any differences will be due to wrong place, wrong value, wrong color. Texture being a combination of value and color. As you work to make your piece match the original, you will really learn how that painting was done, what makes it work, and start learning what they knew that you do not. No amount of staring at a painting will teach you that. Find a picture you really like and copy it. You'll be surprised how much you learn in a very short amount of time. And you will find the learning is in the correcting of your copy as you try to make it match the original, because your first try probably won't match. To restate my drawing steps, I started with a line drawing of value shapes. I make a mid-tone background. I draw the eyeballs and eye shape to make a contrast point to help with the value blocking, keeps you from making the whole face too like, which most people tend to do. And then without using black or white yet, I block in with values, I blend them, then I start adjusting them, blending as needed, and I repeat that adjusting and blending until all the values are as correct as I can get them with gray. Then I'll go in and do the first detailing of the features, then bring the picture up to full value range by finally using black and white, and then I go through and detail everything. And then I'm just looking for final corrections, as far as that takes fixing everything I find. And about layers, I have the base paper layer, which I don't use. The first layer I create is the pencil layer. I used a lighter pencil to make the drawing. I then add a background layer and fill it with a middle tone. I do not want to be painting on a white background where everything looks darker than it really is. I only paint on one layer so I can blend and soften the edges together. On this layer I also set up my value swatches so I can easily just grab them with a dropper tool. Brushes, I only use 3 standard Clip Studio brushes: oil paint, blur, and airbrush. I now finally have screen recording software that actually works with my pen display, and I'm working on another black and white from a still of a TV actress. That's Lagertha from the Vikings. That'll show much more detail about this process and will be actually showing me doing some of the drawing. So please post questions and requests below.